We good? Good morning, everybody. Got it. Welcome to our council workshop for October 10th. We have quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. The time is 11:01. Also, always love to start the meeting off in a good way by acknowledging that the city of Maple Ridge carries out its business on the traditional and unceded territory of the Katzie First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. Before we move to the clerk, we'll move to the CAO. Mr. Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of the corporation, I wanted to introduce to you a new body we have sitting around the horseshoe today. Carolyn Mushada joined us last Tuesday as our new Director of Legislative Services and Corporate Officer. She brings with us with her wealth of experience. She's been in local government for quite a while, and in a variety of different roles, from recreation to CAOs, actually. And so she began her career in corporate services in '98 and has spent the past 6 years as the Director of Corporate Services with the District of Souk on the island. And prior to that was the Manager of Corporate Services with the City of Langley for 8 years. Carolyn is very active on a variety of different committees, including the Corporate Officers Forum, and is chair of the Elections Committee with the LGMA. She's also served on the Provincial Technical Advisory Committee for Elections and is on the Conference Planning Committee for the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. So on behalf of the corporation, I'd like to introduce you to Carolyn Mushada. We're happy that she's joined the team.
Yay. Thank you. Welcome. On that note, again, thank you and welcome to the city. Looking forward to many great sessions and the things that we all can do together. Having said that, I will now pass it off to the clerk if you have something you wish to say.
Nothing to add to that. I will just jump right into the meeting if that's okay. So good morning, and this meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be available for public playback on our website in accordance with Council Policy 3.12. The primary purpose of a council workshop meeting is the receipt of information, review and discussion of policies and other matters of interest to council, and to make decisions related to such matters as required. Your worship, the first item on today's agenda is approval of the agenda.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Duick. Any comments or questions or on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next item.
The next item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes.
So this is for the adoption of the minutes for September 26, 2023. Can I get a motion for that? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Duick. Any comments or questions on the agenda, or sorry, the minutes? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next item, please, Madam Clerk.
The next item on the agenda is item 5.1, Strategic Plan Implementation Framework. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Excellent. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
You blew and the lights all went out. Like a flickered, like a candle.
Did it? I have that effect.
Do it again.
Okay. Hello, Mayor Rumi and members of council. We are really happy to be here today to present council with an overview of a strategic action planning and governance model called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results, and to receive feedback from council on both the proposed approach as well as the specific measurable progress indicators that have emerged from this model. In this presentation today, I will introduce the concepts associated with the OKR framework, and then Dan Olivieri will speak to the actual measurable outcomes called key results that have been developed within this framework to implement council's strategic plan. And he will also speak to the governance framework that has been developed to ensure oversight and cross-functionality of the OKR process, as well as the work ahead. Before we look at the OKR framework, let's briefly look at Council's strategic plan, which is the impetus behind the implementation of OKRs. As Council is aware, the strategic plan consists of a vision, a mission, 6 core values, and together those lead into 5 strategic priorities and 19 goals. The OKR framework will help staff ensure that action is being taken on those strategic goals in a cross-functional way, in a measurable way, and so that the organization, as an organization, we not only do the things that matter, that create those desired outcomes, but we're also measuring progress towards attainment of those strategic goals and priorities. Next slide, please. Thank you. With that in mind, let's take a look at the OKR framework. As mentioned earlier, OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results. The OKR framework is a popular goal setting and governance framework that is used extensively in the private sector, and some of the most innovative companies in the world have used OKRs, and they credit much of their success to this framework. Recently, OKRs have started to be applied in government organizations. A small number of the most innovative municipalities have started transitioning to the OKR methodology, but more are coming on board as the power of this framework is fully realized. And in BC, if we move forward with this and council makes the decision to move forward with OKRs, we would be the first municipality in BC to move forward with OKRs. Let's get into the individual pieces of the framework. At its core, OKRs is a goal-setting framework, as mentioned earlier, that's used by teams and organizations to create alignment around important strategic priorities, the O's, the objectives. This is done by creating measurable targets, the KRs, or the key results, that if those key results are achieved, they will advance those strategic priorities, the objectives. In other words, the OKR methodology will make sure that an organization focuses its efforts on the same strategic, important issues throughout an organization. Using this terminology of the framework, the objectives, again, the O, is a major strategic goal that an organization is looking to achieve. It's usually aspirational and qualitative. It's not quantitative. It's a strategic objective that is both significant and future-looking. In other words, it is the what an organization is trying to achieve. On the other hand, the KRs, or the key results, are a specific but measurable and easily verifiable set of outcomes which, if achieved, will move the organization closer towards realizing the objective. You can think of the KRs as the how an organization will achieve its objectives. I'll provide an example shortly that will put all of this together. In summary, though, while the objective is a qualitative description of what the organization is looking to achieve, the key results is a quantitative, measurable outcome that tells us how we're going to achieve it and how do we know that we're on the right path towards achieving those objectives. In the illustration before you, you can see that key results can also be thought of as mile markers on the road to the objective. No single key result, if achieved, will necessarily deliver on the objective, but if all of the key results are achieved, the objective will be achieved. Typically, each objective will have 3 to 5 measurables associated with it. Let's look at all of these components on a single slide and also introduce one additional concept, the initiatives, which I'll talk about in a second. Here we see that the objectives are the ambitious strategic goals. It's the where an organization wants to go and, importantly, what it wants to achieve. The key results are the measurable steps or outcomes that lets an organization know that progress is being made towards the objective. It's the how. How will we get there? How will we know that we're making progress? Finally, each key result will have one or more initiatives associated with it, which are the projects or the actions that need to be implemented in order to make progress on those key results. This is because key results are not projects or initiatives. Key results are measurable outcomes. The initiatives tell us the things that need to be done to move the needle on the key results. Another way of thinking about this, as on the slide, the objectives, where do we need to go as an organization? The key results, how do I know that I'm on the right path to getting there? And finally, the initiatives. What do I need to do to move the needle on those key results? Let's look at a very simple example. Say, for example, my objective is to become a fluent French speaker. As you can see, that's a goal. It's ambitious. I promise that's ambitious. And it's qualitative. What measurable key results would tell me that I'm moving in the right direction to make progress towards that objective? Remember, it has to be quantifiable and it needs to be specific and time-bound. Well, I could say my French test scores on a language learning app would need to improve to a minimum of 90% every time I take the test within 1 year. That would be a key result. Another key result could be if I read a French novel within 2 years, I only need to translate 20 or fewer words. That's a key result. If I achieve those two things, I'm well on the way to becoming a fluent French speaker. So what kinds of initiatives would I put in place to allow me to reach those quantitative measurements or outcomes? Well, I could sign up for that language learning app. I could do it at least 5 times per week. I could attend a Toastmasters session in French weekly, or I could read 1 French book per week. Those are initiatives that if I do those things, I will likely achieve those measurable outcomes. And if I achieve those measurable outcomes, I'm likely well on the way to achieving the overriding strategic objective. So before we move forward, I wanted to just contrast the OKR framework with KPIs because sometimes they are thought to be the same thing. KPIs, as you know, stands for key performance indicators. While KPRs and OKRs both measure things, the concepts are actually quite different. An OKR measures the achievement of an action-oriented goal or quantitative outcome that shows progress towards those goals. On the other hand, the KPI is an operational performance measure of a business. So for example, a KPI of the operations team might be to measure how many kilometers of roads did we plow during a snow event. They may put in place that KPI and look to improve on it year after year, period after period. It measures the activity and seeks to improve efficiency of that activity over time. On the other hand, an OKR doesn't count activities performed. It counts outcomes. So for example, if the objective of the city is to become the safest winter driving community in a region, then they might have a key result, such as the number of reported auto incidents that resulted from the snow event. So the KPI tracks activity. How many kilometers did we plow? The OKR tracks outcomes. How many reported incidents did we have during a snow event? Some other differences exist in the KPIs versus OKRs, but those are the main ones. So before I pass you on to Dan, I just wanted to mention that this is the start of the OKR process. It's an incremental journey. There's quite a bit more to the OKR framework, and that we'll be proposing this to council over the next few periods and years. As we become accustomed to working with OKRs, working in cross-functional teams, and measuring outcomes relative to the implementation of council's strategic goal. So now that we're all experts in OKRs, I wanted to pass it on to Dan, who will discuss how those OKRs relate to council's strategic plan. He'll talk about the governance model that we've put in place to track the progress of the OKRs, as well as the initiatives that are being implemented. And finally, Dan will go into the specific key results, those specific measurables that are being proposed for each of council's strategic goals.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for having us today. I look forward to actually getting into some of these details because there's been a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to actually bring all this information together because we had a really strong foundation. Council adopted its strategic plan with 19 objectives, 19 goal statements, which we are using as objectives within the OKR framework to build out the implementation plan. The methodology we implemented to actually build out those key results was really 3 inputs. We had staff engagement, where we actually engage with staff across the organization to suss out what are the key priorities from each of their domains. We then built in strategic priority oversight teams, and I'll get to what those are in just a minute, but they're a key foundation in the governance model for the OKR framework. And then we look to our strategic documents, which already provide a pathway and a roadmap for advancing many of these objectives. So I will take a quick step back. We have the staff engagement, we have our strategic plans, and now we have the strategic priority oversight teams comprised of domain experts within each of the priorities of council. These domain experts looked at the engagement data, looked at their strategic documents, and started working through the development of those milestones that will advance each of the objectives. Now, over the course of time, the leads for each of these teams will be providing council with updates on a regular basis with regard to the progress of both initiatives and key results with regard to the framework. In order to advance this first iteration of OKR development, we narrowed the focus to what we are going to do in 2024. Now, there are some exceptions. As you look to the attachment to the report, there are some key results that extend beyond 2024, and there's a couple of reasons why. The most notable of which is within the context of the livable community priority, council recently endorsed the Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan, which within it identified near-term goals out to 2026, near-term goals with regard to housing development in our community. We've leveraged those goals to ensure that there is synergy between delivering on that action plan as well as our short-term housing needs and embedded those within the OKR framework. And then we've built in the initiatives that were proposed within that action plan as well. So that's one example of where we've looked at what we've committed to already and built that into our plan to ensure that we are actually delivering and advancing on the objectives within councils or the next couple of years of council. In addition, you may have noted that where Mr. Lifsh has identified key results as being a little bit more quantifiable in terms of their existing as a metric, we have some binary actions, some strategies and plans embedded as key results. The rationale for us undertaking this kind of approach is that there is foundation setting that is required within some of these priorities to ensure that we are able to develop very robust key results over the coming years and future iterations. And that's why there is the need to actually advance some of these strategies as well as plans and frameworks. As we progress through this planning cycle, we are actually looking to reinvigorate and review the key results for the 2025 through 2026 cycle towards the end of 2024. So again, our focus right now is to the end of 2024. We realize that there's going to be additional opportunities to review these key results, and we'll build those as we move forward to future financial planning cycles as well. Now, I'm going to get into a specific example of a really strong key result. There are 62 key results across the 19 goals and 5 priorities of council. That is a tremendous amount of key results because they're also supported by over 80 initiatives, and we are still in the midst of planning each of those initiatives. There's a tremendous amount of work behind this plan. I'm just going to focus on this one particular objective and key result to give you a sense for how the key results were developed and the integration of the different layers of information. So as you can see, this particular priority is to provide diversity of inclusive and accessible recreation opportunities. The criticality within each of the objectives is our focus on the language, providing inclusive and accessible recreation opportunities. The strategic priority oversight team for this priority then broke out and looked at, again, the engagement data, where we currently stood in terms of a baseline, and identified the opportunity to advance some of our accessibility of our facilities, and then looking at programming. And there's one key result within this particular priority, which I'd really like to highlight. And that's the second one there. Ensure at least 70% of residents, as measured by households, have access to one free community event within a 15-minute walk of their home. This is not arbitrarily identified. In reviewing as we kind of break down each of the tiers, in reviewing the objective, staff identified that the PRC master plan, which was adopted this year, actually identified as one of the key strategies for service delivery to reduce the barriers of access for equity deserving groups. So as we looked at the programming that was available, we identified that the existing existing complement of programs that were provided in 2023 out to the community reached about 50% of the population. The group wanted to aspire to actually engage and provide access to a significantly greater portion of the population, and then identified 70% as that threshold. Going back and then planning, and this is the key to the OKR framework, as opposed to saying this is what we're going to do and this is what we hope to achieve. It's this is what we're going to achieve and how do we actually achieve it. The group went back and identified that by reallocating some of these neighborhood events, we could actually reach a greater portion of the population. And so that's still managing and maintaining our existing budget this year, but still activating and providing access to a greater portion of the population. In addition, the group realized that it was critical to provide access to the existing downtown activation. So not sacrificing what we currently do and the group that's reached by downtown activations by going out into neighborhoods, but augmenting and rethinking the work that we are currently doing. So that's that's one example of the process that was undertaken for each of the key results within this framework. Now, as we look forward, today we're here to approve the key results as a methodology and the key results that are included within the attachment. With the approval, staff will go back and finalize a financial plan for council's consideration during business planning. And that is essentially the financial plan that will activate and really drive forward the delivery of the key results and initiatives that are underlined in the plan or in the implementation plan. Once that financial plan is adopted, we will initiate implementation of these actions. And the first planned report out by the strategic priority oversight team leads is the end of Q1 of 2024. So that would bring to conclusion kind of that first segment of activating and reporting for this cycle. Now, I'm very fortunate to be supported by strategic priority oversight team leads behind me here. So if you have any questions that pertain specifically to those key results, I will do my best to answer them, but the subject matter experts are behind me. So we'll work in tandem to answer any of your questions. And if you have any questions about the framework as well, Mr. Lifshitz and I are happy to answer those as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Is there a recommendation that goes with this?
The resolution is that council
There we
approve
go.
the key results listed in attachment A of the report.
Perfect. Thank you. Can I get a motion to move this item, please? Moved by Councillor Youssef, seconded by Councillor Corleen. Councillor Carreras. Okay, I will open up for questions. Before I do that, thank you very much for the presentation. For somebody who went by KPIs for quite a long time, OKRs, oh, that's an interesting way to do it. So this is interesting. But I will open up the floor to questions. Councillor Schiller, followed by Councillor Carreras.
Thank you, Mayor Remy, and thank you to staff for the presentation and for all the work that has brought us to this moment. I really like this framework. To me, this provides a lot of clarity around how we, what our objectives are and how we plan on meeting them. And I really like the focus on progress as opposed to tasks or effort, and being able to report back on that and sort of go from there. So I really like the framework. That example you shared, Mr. Olivieri, about the providing the activities to 70% of the residents. That was sort of one that stood out to me. I thought that was a very equitable approach and might be a good way of us, sort of identifying some gaps that we just hadn't really been aware of previously by sort of taking that kind of equity lens to things. And I also really like to hear that we can achieve that within our existing budget. It's great. So I do have just some questions about some of the specific key results. Okay, under climate leadership objective, we have enhance and protect the health of our natural environment. Key result 3 is to protect and conserve 9 hectares of land. It just seems like a very specific goal. And I wondered if there was any, sort of particular area or opportunity that had us thinking along those lines.
Mr. Lifshitz is actually the strategic priority site lead for that priority. So I'll flip it over.
Thanks, Dan. So I will start as the spot lead. We had quite a bit of discussions about this particular one, and recognizing that to preserve the natural environment, the city needs to take a proactive approach. We looked at the numbers that have been preserved in the past through development, and we wanted to accelerate that. So we wanted a number that is ambitious yet not unachievable, recognizing that we'll have to put some new pieces in place to achieve that goal, and also recognizing that if we do achieve it, we can then become more ambitious over time. But we didn't want to reach for something that we wouldn't be able to actually hit a target. But it is quite a bit more than we have historically been able to achieve through just development.
Okay, and you mentioned specifically that this was land that was protected through the development process. So is this sort of where a certain area is set aside for conservation or something when we're looking at a proposal?
That's correct. It's land. What's the word? Dedication. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Carreras, please.
Thank you. Oh boy, I was so excited when I read this last night. You know, I love my strategic plans. Thank you so much for doing this. This is great. I quite like the way it's laid out. I love the little icons just to say, hey, this goes back to this area. There's things that we've already worked on. We already have a big plan, and it's just about bringing some of this to light in the next year. So I really appreciate that. I'm wondering if we can go to your last slide. Because with any strategic plan, strategic alignment and implementation is always key for me. And there were some dates in the last one. I want to just make sure I've got the circle in our time frame, our annual time frame, as to how this all rolls out. So my understanding is, budget, so strategic plan informs budget, and budget informs implementation, implementation review informs, and we start the cycle again. So I just want to, so right now we're reviewing this. This is going to inform our budget business planning that's coming to us in November. And then we implement the budget. And then in the spring is when we're going to come back and talk about these measurements and review. Because as you said, a lot of these are annual attainable key result. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Oh, it's right there in front of me. And then it comes back. Okay, so from now, from what I get now is we approve this, it goes into business planning, though I would assume business planning is well underway by now. By the time it comes to us, it's kind of too late for this, although you've had our strategic plan, so you should know where we want to go. And then what is the initiate implementation in January? What exactly is that again?
So for any projects that require additional funding, that would be approved through the financial plan.
Okay.
And so we actually have authority to spend the funds, begin undertaking the work, and then we'll report out at the end of Q1. A second reporting period will actually happen at the end of Q3. We're looking to time that along with business planning so we can report out on progress, have the data to inform council as well as staff as to how we are doing with regard to implementation and make any adjustments for subsequent cycles.
Okay. So business planning is sort of the overarching goals you want to achieve. The initiate implementation is the actual funding when you come. This is our recommendation. You want to increase taxes by this much because we're going to do this. That's the spring initiate piece. And then later in spring is when we're actually going to review this again to see if this is reflective, because you want to be able to do it in time for business planning. Is that?
Did I get it? Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
So spring is when we're going to do our review. How far have we come? What is our next year? So that it's in time for business planning and then just start. Okay. Sorry, the circle is very important to me because if there's no strategic alignment, it's just paper, right? Yes. So I just want to make sure I've got when I need to be prepared to really do this, and it's coming back to us with that review piece, which is great. I did have some specific questions. Just let me know when I'm getting to my time limit. I had a question on, let me go, diversified thriving economy. Objective, explore and maximize tourism opportunities as a means to further diversify our local economy. KR1, implement a net promoter score for Adventure Hub, urban hotspots, farm fresh experiences, and set baseline to improve by 20% by the end. Can you just sort of elaborate what is that exactly? What does that mean?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Net Promoter Score is really about looking at who is saying what in your community for the experiences that you have here. So for those that are in each one of those key focus areas in our tourism strategy, we get to look at those that are net promoting in our community about a great experience that we have here. So what it allows us to do is to see where there are gaps in the customer experience, what supports we may be able to provide in workshops or education or otherwise, and to look to increase that net promotion, so to speak, of those experiences, and hence Maple Ridge and our tourism opportunities here over the course of the year.
Okay.
So that's through a series of different surveys, could be a series of engagements that we have those business owners and or tourism venues.
And the improve by 20% is just the improve of the, I guess, the good,
The promotion.
the
yeah,
good piece, which
Yeah.
essentially should mean that more people are coming if there's more people saying good things about us.
correct.
Correct? Okay, great. Thanks. Engaged, healthy community. And this is probably where I had my most, no surprise to anyone. Most of my questions. Thank you so much for putting WCAMs and guideline standards in there. I think they do a lot of really good work, and anytime we can utilize their knowledge and expertise to help us be a more accessible community, I think that's a really great thing. The last one, okay, so provide a diversity of inclusive and accessible recreation opportunities, KR3, increase participation in subsidized recreation programs by 10% through the development of city-specific criteria on financial access funding. This one's a really of interest to me, but of course, because when I look at increase in participation, I want to look at the diversity of the increase. And I'm wondering if some of those key measurables that the staff will be using, not us, which is that, okay, RC, I get that. But the diversity, like are there more sort of lower income families? Are we making it our recreation more accessible to them? So more and more participating. Are there more and more new Canadians that are accessing our facilities? Are we looking at sort of the breakdown of some of those equity seeking groups and looking to break it down even further to see if we're increasing their participation in our recreation?
So at the highest possible level, we currently use federal standards to determine qualification. Now, what's representative at a federal level is not what transpires here regionally in terms of affordability and incomes. So by rebalancing those metrics, we are hoping to create more availability and access to those programs. Now, in terms of metrics that we track, that's a different conversation to some degree, but we are hoping that by decreasing the barriers, we are providing more access across the board.
Okay. So when that does come back to us in the spring and we're assessing as to where we are, I would be interested in seeing some of the demographic breakdowns as to where we're seeing increases, because I think there's a general public that it's always going to increase. It's easily accessible, but I'm actually interested in the groups that we're not getting to and why are we not getting to those groups to increase that participation in our recreational opportunities. And I'd like to be able to know what those barriers are so that we can remove them. So just so you know, when that comes back, I'd be curious to know about that. Promote a vibrant arts and culture community. This one, I just felt, I'm wondering if, so we talk about public art. There's a new public art policy. I'm on the public art steering committee. It's awesome. It's great. And then it talks about museum needs assessment, but it really doesn't talk about anything else about art, culture, festivals in our community, a youth engagement strategy. I think we have a youth engagement strategy. There's a ton of stuff that's in that. And it doesn't talk about increasing festival attendance. And I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do to sort of, again, like I'd rather just pass this and get this done with, but I feel like there's something missing there, that we're actually just talking about public art and a museum, which are two great things, but we're not talking about some of those real, I don't know, art pieces, right? So
I will take that feedback back to the group. However, I will just note that this is a very synergistic approach. Mm-hmm. While there aren't specific KRs related to festivals and events under this objective, if you'll note the support for BC Summer Games, the support for Maple Ridge 150, the increasing access at a neighborhood level, these are all elements that still contribute. They're just not listed specifically. We will make those connections in the background. That way we can see how we're actually leveraging impacts, but leveraging impacts essentially of one program on other intended benefits.
Yeah, and just know that 2024 Summer Games has a sports focus, and I'm talking about more of a specific arts focus. And though I understand that arts will have a key role in the 2024 games, right? I think that if there's any way that we can look at how do we engage and expand the artists in our community and highlight whether that work is with the Arts Council or whatever. I just, I'll leave it with you guys to know that I hope we can do more with that. ensure a safety enhanced, sorry, this is where I had a lot of questions. I told you this is good. This was my big one. Develop a,
Sorry,
am I tied?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
no
gonna go to the
problem.
second
I
round.
pause it here. I'm happy to go on to the
Hit
next
the
round.
pause button.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. We're gonna move to Councillor Tan.
Thank you, staff. It's a pleasure meeting with you, Stan. Having a clear line of sight as to the other working, maybe it's year and a half. I'm so. How's this? Perfect. Thank you. I have some specific questions for the different sections. So just starting with the livable community section, and we started talking a little bit about the target numbers. Could you please point me to sort of I see a 2.5% here in terms of increasing housing supply, 30 below market units, multi-unit housing portion of building stock by 4%. Could you sort of walk me through specifically where those numbers come from and the timelines?
Yes. Specifically, these the KR number 2, which is increased housing supply, that's 2.5% over our baseline growth. That comes directly from the Housing Accelerator Fund Action Plan. So in order to meet the requirements of that grant, we are looking to increase by 2.5%, equivalent to 450 additional units by the end of 2020, by Q3 of 2026.
Sorry, remind me what the baseline is.
The baseline is approximately it's approximately 8% over that same period. So now we're bumping up over 10% total growth in unit count. So equivalent to about 1,800 units.
Just to make sure I understand, we're looking at a total number of buildings of units in Maple Ridge, and
That's
we're going
correct.
to increase it by 10%.
Yes,
By Q3 of 2026.
that's correct.
Okay, and just to make sure I understand, and so I understand that it came from the Housing Affordability Action Plan funding grant. Can you, and how is that related to the housing needs assessment we did in 2021?
So the spread or the diversity of housing typologies is actually informed by that housing, the housing strategy. Now, I am somewhat speaking out of turn as Ms. Grockwich, a representative from planning. I will actually perhaps look to. No.
Mr. Hartman.
Thank you to yourself and members of council. Just keep in mind that we're updating the housing needs assessment now. And so that data will then update these KRs as we develop the new data set coming November. And that strategy will be received by council in probably February, March of 2024. And so that will reinform these numbers to ensure that we're doing best practices based on current data. So what staff did was benchmark off the 2021, but as you know, 2021 and 2023 are fundamentally different years, given where we're sitting with affordable housing. So that's why we expedited the updated needs assessment for the numbers, and that data set will be in November. You'll have that around business planning times. We can have that engagement conversation, but the final report will be in front of council in February or March of 2024, and then staff will update the KRs accordingly.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the reminder that it's going to be updated. What I'm trying to understand is from when I looked at the 2021 numbers from the report, we saw 2,200 households in 2016 that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And that's given that's the 4B benchmark. And so if that's 2,200 households in 2016, which was 7 years ago, that are past the affordability threshold, I'm seeing the number here is 30 households, 30 units. So I'm not understanding how, when our report says we need 2,200 households are in this threshold, are not meeting the affordability threshold, that our goal here is 30 units. It does not. So can you explain the discrepancy for me there?
To some degree, the background is that there are approval timelines built in. So a development that is approved even today, while we are doing our best to optimize our approval processes, construction does take time. And so what we're looking at is what is currently in our approvals process that will be constructed by Q4 2025, because we do have to factor in actual construction.
Does those numbers include construction? So complete and ready, 30. So I'm understanding 30 units ready to move in by Q4 2025?
Assigned a building permit.
Permit, yeah.
So sorry, approved building permit. So they've received final.
Okay. Okay. So I think thank you.
And I'll actually look to Mr. To Forrest behind me, who's actually the lead for the strategic priority oversight team, as he may have additional information that could be beneficial.
Yeah, no, I think what Mr. Olivieri was suggesting is accurate in this. And we really looked at these numbers, tried to determine what can we achieve while still being aggressive with the plan. And a lot of it came down to what is in the hopper, what we typically look at on an annual basis, what we're trying to commit to the Housing Accelerator Fund. And then we increased it a bit from there by the 2.5%. And so there's certainly an opportunity for us to increase this as years go on. But as we improve our development permit application process and streamline that process through council for approvals, we need to look out at what that impact is for the next year and a half, 2 years when we start getting building permit applications come in for that work. And so we're suggesting right now increasing by 2.5% is a good incremental for us to consider at this point in our journey. But as things improve and we continue to speed the process up, we could certainly start looking at increasing that even more in the future.
Can I just jump in for 1 second, please? I'm a little confused because when we did the Housing Accelerator Fund, we used a 20% number.
It was a 20% increase on your existing baseline growth.
Okay, and now you're saying it's 2.5% on.
So it's 2.5% on. Sorry. So if our growth factor was 1.1%, we had to increase that percentage by no less than 20%.
Okay.
As opposed to looking at purely at unit count.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that. And I think maybe I'm hearing a little bit of confusion around, at least on my part. Just to sort of to clarify my point here, I'm not understanding. I understand we want to be ambitious and innovative in terms of our housing supply and particularly locking in affordability, because everyone's struggling right now. And I would just to clarify what I'm trying to say here, I don't see 30 units as an ambitious target, given that we have 2,200 households not meeting the affordability threshold in 2016. And that was 7 years ago. So I don't see the alignment here between what we said in terms of ambition and innovation. And I understand, I have a lot of empathy for the building permit process, the timelines. We want to make sure that folks are in buildings that are safe. We want to make sure that standards are not compromised. And I don't see this as necessarily meeting our ambition, our desire for ambition.
Through your worship, if I could just add a little bit more information, and if you have more, please jump in. My understanding is this, that we looked at historic numbers. We wanted to be significantly more ambitious than historic numbers. But with the Housing Accelerator Fund, the key piece is that through the Housing Accelerator Fund, we need to put in a number of initiatives in order to qualify for the fund. And those initiatives will do multiple things like attract more affordable housing developers, but also accelerate the process. That means that over this 2-year period, we've got time to put in all of those initiatives and reach a 30 unit count, which is, as I said, significantly higher than before. But once those initiatives are in, then you've got a faster approvals process. So the future can be faster, but 2 years to put in all of those initiatives like a concierge service and put in other pieces that shorten that process and get to building permit process, to building permit for a number that is quite a bit more than we've had historically. We felt that that was actually quite an ambitious target, and that's why we put it forward for the HAF. If we thought we could be more ambitious, we would have put a bigger number forward, because the HAF is a beneficial program, to say the least. So, but once those pieces are in place, they're fundamental pieces, but once those pieces are in place, beyond the end of 2026, then you've got the ability to accelerate even further. But these are fundamental pieces.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so I'm just going to wrap that point up. I think I appreciate the difference between putting in the baseline years to establish these programs in order to have faster acceleration. And I also appreciate the need from the community right now that has been here for a long time and is persistent and is burning. So I think it is up to us in a difficult work to reconcile both things, the need for bureaucratic processes and also understand the dire need that folks are in. So I'm going to put that there and leave it there and stop for now. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Councillor Dewick, followed by Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to staff for the presentation. I really appreciate this document as somebody that's been through a few strategic plans and implementation. I really like the layout. I really like that there's, it's bold. I also appreciate that the historic numbers we shouldn't focus so much on the numbers right now until we've actually gone through business planning and then looked at our review in the spring, because it is a new layout. It is a new path forward. So I think you have all the key results in there. The question is it 20%? Is it 30? Those are things that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can adjust as we get more information, because a lot of these are tied to master plans that aren't complete yet. So right there, that might change some things. So for me, I focused on every section and what was in there from the key results perspective. Did it cover off the things that I think we needed to see in a document based on our strategic planning session, based on council's feedback? And it does. So I didn't see anything that I would suggest needed to be added, but certainly we could all go through each one and say, well, we could change this. But I think we should allow it some time to go through a couple of processes, and particularly that update in Q1 will really help us. And then we can say, okay, this is what we're experiencing. So maybe let's be more bold. But for now, I think you've covered it off. It was really exceptionally well done. Councillor Carreras asked a couple of questions, so I won't repeat what she had asked because you answered those already. So from my perspective, I think it's really positive, and it's definitely an improvement over past strategic plans and implementations. Thank you.
Did you want to add something, Mr. Hartman?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just so council's aware, this is as I say, it's a brand new framework that we're implementing, which is as we go through several iterations, we're going to be able to get right into the minutia from a corporate perspective, and then council will see the governance side of it. As Councillor Dewick's pointed out, this is a living document. It's not going to be a stagnant. So staff are going to use this. This is going to help me and administration prioritize funding requirements and workflows to council based on these KRs, and they'll be updated and presented on a regular basis back to council. And this is where we're going to be able to know if we're hitting the monikers or not. And so, as I say, this is an organic, living, breathing document that will be plastered on walls at City Hall. It'll be in the council chambers. It'll be in boardrooms. It also drives accountability. And so we know when we're hitting that mark, and if council wants to make changes, then as a CAO, I can present to council and say, these are the things that are no longer relevant, or these are the KRs that we've achieved, and we need to develop another set. One of the things that I know Mr. Olivieri and Mr. Lifshitz kind of brushed over, but I really wanted to hammer home to council so you're aware. The process that these two gentlemen have gone through rolling this out has been cross corporation. The SPOT teams have representation from across the organization. So these are very much not done in boxes or in isolation. These are corporate initiatives that are shoulder to shoulder between divisions and departments and business units and sections to make sure that everyone is pulling in the same direction that council wants their strategic plan to go. And so I just wanted to for council's benefit and understanding that this is really driving the corporate direction, and it's that corporate roadmap that is going to be fleshed out as we do more iterations of this, as we get more detail and more infinite data collected through this process. But again, just at the outset, as Councillor Dewick alluded to, this is very much a living, breathing, organic document that'll be in front of council numerous times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry. There we go. Found my voice again. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start off today by offering my support and condolences to all our friends, family, neighbors and staff who are struggling with the news that's coming out of the Middle East as it unfolds. Yeah, it's a heavy day, heavy week. Looking at this report, Mr. Chair, I'd like to extend my gratitude to staff for having taken on that work and the diligent work that you've done. You've done a magnificent amount of work. I very much appreciate Mr. Hartman's comments about this being across the entire organization view of doing business and moving forward. I will be supportive of it being approved today as it stands to really put us on the correct path to achieve what we would like to see. The layout is very logical and gives us the ability to cross-reference the objectives and with the steps that will be taken to achieve it. On that, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, just a quick question. When we're looking at, and I'm specifically looking at the diversified thriving economy section of it, looking at, for example, KR3, where we're completing a business retention and expansion analysis and implementation plan. Realizing that we do have a new business retention and expansion person on staff, I would have appreciated seeing a little bit of a time frame. I understand that at the top with KR1, we're talking about Q3 of 2025. Would the analysis and implementation plan fall under the Q3 of 2025, or would it occur at a different time frame? And that's where I would be looking for the individual KRs, if you will, having that time tag to them estimated, of course.
Through the chair to Councillor Youssef. So we do have a time estimate. For anyone that's absent a time frame, it will be completed in 2024. Specifically, I will actually look to Mr. Westover to elaborate on the time frame for that particular key result.
Thank you, Mr. Olivieri. Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe initially as our timeframe we had as Q3 2024 to give us enough time to go through our baseline analyses, to go through building our program and setting consistent steps that we can follow moving along and have that across the organization. So I would anticipate that that's when we will be back to council and or have that process here in place here in Maple Ridge.
Wonderful, thank you. And I was hoping to have that analysis and implementation plan before Q3 2025. So I'm glad to hear that. And again, thank you, gentlemen, and all of the other staff members that have supported you on this work. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no others for the first round, I will save my comments for later. Now we'll go to round two. Councillor Carreras was first, then Councillor Schiller.
Could just
And then
go in the same order we had last time. Okay, so back to the green one. Engage healthy community. I just want to say thank you to Mr. Hartman for talking about the livable document. That I wholeheartedly agree, and that's why the strategic alignment and circle is so important to me, because it has to be a livable document, and we have to be able to assess where we are and reassess and reassign and review. So going down to ensure the safety, enhance the well-being of residents, KR1, develop a community safety action plan. Do we not already have a community safety action plan? Is this just reassess and?
So as council's aware, this is our CSI program 2.0 and 3.0, and that work is currently underway as we speak.
Okay, so I was just wondering if we needed to review and maybe not develop, because I just wanted to double check that. And then the other piece, so we talk about the deintegration, we talk about the fire master plan. Awesome. The one thing that I just thought, again, these are things that I'm just throwing at you now. I'm happy to pass this. Is the other thing that a big piece around safety for the community is actually just like driving and walking and just everyday life pieces. And I just think that that was missing, whether there's a reference to our active transportation plan, whether it's a reference to lowering accident rates within our community because we have safer roadways. I just thought the safety piece just around your general everyday life was missing on that. Improve community engagement with the city. KR3, I'm wondering if you can just explain a little bit on conduct a participatory budget pilot. I'm curious, what is that?
Participatory budgeting is a process where along the IAP2 spectrum, an allocation of budget is then is actually provided to the community to decide, what are the projects that should be funded through a specific allocation. So during business planning, we will present an incremental request for a portion of budget. And then subsequently in Q1 of 2024, we will bring forward a couple of proposed methodologies for how we'll undertake the work. But essentially, it's empowering the community to make decisions as to where budget allocations go for a portion of budget.
Okay, thank you. I always love public engagement. Governance and corporate excellence, another one. My heart loves these ones. I just have a quick question on the first one, identify and commit to opportunities for the city to move forward on a path of truth and reconciliation. We talk about developing relationships. I'm not sure if strategy is the right word for it, but KR2, we talk about like council to council relationship building between Katesay Nation and Kwantlen First Nation. And I'm wondering, we talked about a lot about Indigenous peoples involved, Métis and Inuit First Nations. And so this talks about land-based first, like the land of Katesay and Kwantlen, but it doesn't talk about urban Indigenous and doesn't talk Métis. And we do have two really wonderful organizations, Frists and Gems, within our community that I think it would be important to recognize the working with Indigenous peoples. All of them. And then I just going down to be accountable to the public through open and responsive government, KR1. We talk about 75% of existing bylaws. I just need to say I did put a little heart next to this one because you've heard me talk about this. So I am like, oh my God, I think I almost started crying when I saw this. My question is, I know policies and bylaws are different, but do we need to take some sort of review of our bylaws?
So there was significant discussion at the SPOT team level about that. Given the commitments across the board for all of our KRs, it was identified that policies would come first, but that bylaws would then be a subsequent iteration.
As long as it's in your mind, bylaws. And then one last thing, and I am good. Thank you so much. This is a beautiful document. My only question is in the layout of the document, we have livable communities at the very end, but within our strategic document that we approve livable communities was at the top. And I would argue it is a significant piece of work that we need to engage in. And so I'm just wondering if we should make sure this document reflects our strategic plan in the order. Not that one is more of a priority than the other, it's just that livable communities was first in our other document. It's just a comment. Thank you so much. I'm good.
Thank you very much. Moving to Councillor Schiller.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rumi, and to staff. I just have a few more questions to follow up as well, just really for my own clarity. Under the objective of facilitating expanded housing diversity and supply, QR1, create development application prioritization criteria. What is our timeline for that one?
So we tentatively have it planned as a Q1 2024 deliverable in order to align with some of the other initiatives, including the development of a concierge service, as the two pieces of work will actually go hand in hand.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that. I think that's a really important and exciting step for us. And I'm glad to hear that it's coming up relatively soon. Under the objective of improving mobility, very, very happy to see talk of the completion of the east-west cycling route, a plan coming forward in the next few years for that. QR3 is increase the cycling network by 3 kilometers. And well, I'm happy to see this. I just think back to the strategic transportation plan and some of our discussions around support for the cycling, and within sort of those discussions, certainly there was a much higher number of cycling infrastructure mentioned, and I appreciate that was not all going to happen this year. But can I just get a little bit more insight into sort of where the 3 kilometer number came from and how that might compare to what we have done this year, say?
Sure. And so I think maybe just before we get into answering that, it's important to recognize there are still a number of key projects within the capital plan for cycling and walking amenities. And so what we're looking at here is given the short time frame for implementation, we're looking at those quick win implementation pieces. So once you start thinking about design, permitting, and construction, that takes you outside of this short-term vision of these action items in the strategic plan. And so what we're looking at is those quick implementation items. So we're looking at items where we can fit cycling facilities within existing right-of-ways, at the reduction of parking for cycling facilities. And we're looking at these focused in and around our town center area. And so we looked at what we think we could accomplish based upon some of those items out there, and then like some of those road constraints that are currently out there, plus what we have in the strategic transportation plan. So this is done with the vision of the strategic transportation plan in front of us. And so we're trying to tie those two together, but have some quick implementation pieces. So this is that quick implementation piece that's coming forward.
Thank you. And, I think that is part of what's helpful about this discussion, right? What is realistic this year, next year? Let's talk about that. So I appreciate that. So just a final clarification then, increasing the cycling network by 3 kilometers. Does that mean like new cycling infrastructure where none has previously existed? Or could that also refer to improving some existing, or making use of sort of an existing facility and upgrading it somewhat?
So it could be both. It's likely if new cycling facilities in areas that haven't had or have had on-road facilities in the past. And a lot of these, what we're looking at is some of these north-south connections. We've got to focus on east-west right now in the capital plan. And so we're looking at adding some of those north-south connections in areas where we could potentially displace street parking for cycling or walking facilities.
Thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Through the chair, just a quick addition. So when this framework is used in the private sector, the companies typically have a quarterly OKR framework. So every quarter, they fully replace all of their OKRs, and the only ones that remain are the ones that weren't met. They typically never remove an OKR. If it wasn't met, they'll roll it over. We went with a 1-year framework, as Mr. Olivieri said. Everything that you see before you is at a maximum of the end of 2024, except for the ones that have a different date. Those are will be that date, but everything else is 1 year. That means that within that time frame will be, not only is this a living document that can be updated as plans come on stream, but within a year, we're completely refreshing all of these, right? So if you think about kind of the goal to achieve things, remember that this continues on forever. Every year we'll be developing new OKRs. So while I totally get the desire to achieve a lot, also remember that this has kind of been developed in a way to ensure that staff can actually implement this within that allowed time frame, recognizing that the next series will be more of what you're looking for and more of what you're looking for. So it's an incremental process. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that this isn't a document that is there for many years, and this is all we're going to achieve. Within a year, all of these, except for a few of them, will be entirely new. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think when we're talking about going to Councillor Tan's point of 30 homes. I think there may be a bit of a disconnect there. And I'm going to ask Mr. Hartman if you can elaborate on 30 homes doesn't sound like a lot, right? So could you help us to understand that number?
So I think council's made it very clear that they want to be more aggressive. And the challenge that we have corporately is some of our systems are not necessarily designed or effective to the point where we're going to be able to achieve those numbers. So as Mr. Lefsch's has identified, what we want to be able to do is to ensure that we're hitting the monikers and hitting the accountability metrics. And as we develop with the KRs and the processes, we want to make sure that they're reflective of the needs of council, but at the same time, allowing us to get these things done within the next 3-year term. And so one of the challenges that we have is we update the data, especially with respect to affordable housing. We know that that's a key priority. We also know that there's a lot of front end work that we have to do. We need to look at our DCCs and our CACs with respect to affordable housing. Council's asked us to look at our available publicly owned lands and whether or not we can achieve those. That also strikes a conversation around P3 agreements and partnership agreements with nonprofit housing societies. And as you recall from our conversations at UBCM with the housing ministries in particular, that there's a lot of additional work that we want to get done in that timeframe. And so I would implore council to be a little more reserved, I think, on this iteration as we develop the roadmap to get you to where you ultimately want to be, knowing that this is a live and organic document that's going to grow and expand as we get traction on some of these components. Ms. Bess has been with the organization for 3 weeks plus a day now. And some of the things that she's working on implementing with Mr. Smith and with Mr. Westover and other staff throughout the organization is really aligning you to start hitting the ground running in early 2024. And then that's why that priority statement, we can adjust those numbers at that point as we get through the budget piece. But from the CAO's perspective, what's in front of council is achievable within the current confines of the current budget. And that is why we're taking this position. It allows me to reprioritize the workflow and the work plans of staff, as well as provide council with a direct line of sight on what the future expansion pieces of the corporation looks like, should council wish to pull her in a different slightly direction of what that impact looks like. So the intention, as Mr. Lifshitz has identified, is that all of these are achievable given all of the buckets. And that's why it's important that the SPOT teams are cross-departmental, so that an impact on one area can be offset by an impact on another area. So that's, I think, in a nutshell, how we're approaching this piece. I appreciate there's some deadlines in here, to be quite frank with council, that I pushed back on, thinking 2025 is a little too late. But I got to trust the process we go, and we'll be able to make those adjustments as we get this thing underway.
Thank you. Councillor Chan.
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you to everyone for a fruitful conversation. I think that I have some specifics here, and I think in terms of broadly, I think what we're seeing here is that push-pull between the needs of government and the needs of community as we sort of try and respect both the bureaucratic processes and the needs of the community. And I think this is a very fruitful channel for us to bring the needs of the community here as our elected representatives, and also signal to the development community, to staff, and to the community. This is where our numbers are. We know that you need more, and we know that the community desperately needs more and is desperately asking for more. And we're not, this is just the first year, and we are going to ramp up those numbers. And I think it's a very clear signal to the community and to everyone, also everyone involved, that this is where this council is heading. Now to more specifics. I wanted to ask, just following on Councillor Carez's point about the youth and the youth strategy, I didn't see any action or implementation items here. I may have missed them, pardon me, from the 2018 youth strategy. Could you sort of point me to where we are sitting with that?
I don't feel best positioned to speak. We can circle back unless Mr. Laban would like to elaborate on the youth strategy.
I don't have it in front of me, Councillor Tan. What are your questions? And I can have staff follow up.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think that given that these are the list of things we're going to accomplish in the next 18 months, it'd be lovely to see some items from those already approved youth strategy from the previous council adopted into this document, just to make sure that we're respecting the continuity of work that has been done before. I look forward to that update when it comes through. Just to the climate portion, I just wanted to make sure I understood. There's on the portion around the EV chargers. I see, maybe I'm missing something here. I see one bullet point for install 20 level 2 EV chargers, and then the next bullet point is install 20 level 2 EV and 2 level 3 chargers. Is that 20 plus 20, or is that 20 total?
So it's actually a phased implementation. So the first set of 20 EV chargers will be installed in 2024. Now, as we bring on and try to kind of prepare ourselves for delivering on all light duty fleet, that will be a 2025 initiative where we install the second set of 20 chargers in addition to the 2 level 3 DCFC fast chargers. And again, this is fleet charging and not public charging.
Wonderful. Thank you. Right. Just for our municipal fleet.
That's correct.
Thank you. I was very happy to see that. I think that it indicates EVs are not the only solution of the climate crisis, but I was really happy to see that that was continued from our strategic plan. So thank you for that. They'll serve as a big upgrade to where we are currently. I had some questions around the transportation section. And just to follow on Councillor Schiller's points there, I was curious around the public transportation piece. I know a large focus as corporation is on bus rapid transit. And then just to be mindful of the transit that we do currently have as well about buses, were there any action items considered here that would sort of make public transit, so buses and that more attractive to the public?
So thank you. So through the mayor, so we didn't include any of the public transit pieces in this, and we did have some discussions around the table about it. But given that they are outside of municipal control, we were trying to keep these to within items that we could control as a municipality, as opposed to TransLink-led service deliveries. Having said that, there are items within our strategic transportation plan about improved benches and transit facilities that we could certainly include in here if it was council's wish.
Thank you, Sudan. And through the mayor, I think that we've had a few conversations around the table about improved like bus pads and stops. And we know we've had a few emails about shelters around bus pads, given that we're going into more inclement weather now. And I think that would be a good, if that's already in the works, I think that would be a good thing to put here so that every staff member who looks at this in every meeting room and every boardroom is clear that this council is both interested in bus rapid transit and very pushing for that, as well as not forgetting the bread and butter of our transit system, which is buses, and will continue to be buses for a while. I was curious around the walking aspect of this. I know we've touched on public transit, we've touched on cycling. Do we have any plans in the next 18 months to improve our walking infrastructure?
So thank you. So again, through the mayor, and so the walking infrastructure improvements, well, we have some included in the capital plan currently, and we'll continue to include them in the capital plan. They are difficult items to suggest that we'll deliver within a year and a half, given the design, permitting, and construction aspect of them. They're less able to flex space like the cycling, where we can keep cycling on road and do things like reduce parking to provide cyclist space. And so they're more of a long-term infrastructure solution piece that I guess we're just challenged as to how that lives within this year and a half type schedule.
I see that makes sense to me in terms of the planning and building. I understand there's lots of steps involved in that actually before we get to the building. I'd be curious if there's any sort of plans in work. I know when we talked to the housing section, we talked about units that had been approved, the permitting processes were improved, but not necessarily built. I wonder if there's any sort of pieces like that around walking that we could do, not necessarily the construction finish in 18 months, but sort of so that the public and staff understand that we're well on our way, or this is the progress we can be making in terms of walking in that time. I'll leave that for now. And I'm just going to follow on Councillor Schiller's point of KR1, the complete east to west AAA bike route. I was excited to see that. I'm sure many people are excited to see that. And I too am concerned around the timeline, and just acknowledge Mr. Hartman's points. I know that we're setting up the foundation here, and then we're going to accelerate in the future. And I just want to note again my interest in that quick acceleration. And I think in general, I am supportive of this strategic plan implementation plan framework. I see many things here that give me a lot of cause for smiling, a lot of cause for joy. And in general, in terms of this process, I've appreciated this process. I would have greatly appreciated more context on the number of pieces. I know we asked about the 9 hectares. I too was Googling 9 hectares. What percentage of that is that in terms of the overall Maple Ridge land base? How does that conservation target compare to other cities, sort of mid-sized cities, but those are difficult comparisons to make on a Sunday and Thanksgiving long weekend. And so I think it was quite challenging for me to understand the context of these KRs. And I understand that providing staff context for each of these KRs would take a lot of staff time, and have a lot of respect for that. And I just needed a little more support here in terms of understanding these KRs, so that maybe when I come to the council table, I could be more prepared rather than me chat GPTing everything just to make sure I understand what's going on. So I just wanted to put that out there for staff consideration. And then the last thing too is is I think I might be, I might have to send my iPad back to tech support here. They're not going to be very happy with me because I think I got Dal all over my iPad as I was trying to eat my Thanksgiving dinner and analyze these very important OKRs that would set our direction in the next 18 months, having to do that over Thanksgiving long weekend. And I think expecting our community members to do that, spilling cranberry sauce over their laptops, I think is a challenge for a lot of us. I appreciate that we're trying to get this done before the business planning timeline. And I think that I'm not a fast analyzer. So I think I would personally would have benefited from more time. I suspect other members of the community would have as well. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I think I'll jump in on the whole transit aspect of this. I think it's important to understand, while we've been focused as a city on BRT, right? If you actually look at the Access for Everyone plan, the 10-year plan that they have, one of the other targets that they're doing is doubling the bus service over 2022 service levels. So the question then becomes, where's TransLink getting the funding for this? So when we look at that 10-year plan, the city is not the one that's going to dictate how many buses we have and so on and so forth. So it's difficult to try to push that issue. But again, when you look at the overall plan for TransLink, knowing that they want to double their bus service over 2022 levels is one of those targets. Another one would be increase handy dart service for people with disabilities by 60% and provide 24-hour service. I mean, I think we all agree that would be great. Question is, where are they going to get the funding for it? And this is why their TransLink has that campaign going of access for everyone. So that's, I just wanted to make sure that there was an understanding there that it's not just BRT. BRT is actually within our ability because we're the ones that have to approve it. We have to want to be able to do this. We have to want to be able to work with TransLink. So that is very much in our capacity to do so. As far as bus service, that's more of a funding level with TransLink. And then again, one of the other things I'll add on, because it does feed into what we've been talking about, is expanding, is one of their other goals, expanding cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. So they have put in there, or they are putting in a lot of funding towards helping communities hit some of these targets, which I think is very important. But again, I think there's a role for us to play here because we can do some of that, but there's also a big role that TransLink is trying to figure out how they can contribute to that as well. As far as I'm concerned, when I look at the project and understanding of OKRs, I think it's a great start. It is a living document. When we get back our housing needs report next year, that's going to help us identify exactly where we need to go and some of the things that we need to do. And I think it's about getting our organization on track to be able to execute the targets that are being set by this council. Well, ours is the vision. Their role is to come up with targets and how they're going to execute those targets. The last thing we want is a whole bunch of goals on a piece of paper with no way of achieving those goals. And so I understand the need for where we're at. I also know that a year from now, if everything goes the way we want it to go, our bandwidth and our capability is going to be greatly improved. So I think this is a great start, and I'm looking forward to that as well. Any final comments or questions? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had a procedural question. I was just curious I think around the table, we brought up some questions that were more easily addressed that could be incorporated in the plan, not the large items, but just off the small housekeeping items. If this plan framework were to be approved today, would there still be room for those pieces to be added in?
Mr. Hartman?
So as to Councillor Tan's point, what staff are asking for today is acceptance by council for the framework, and you have the draft, you have the document in front of you. This gets us moving through business planning. As we tweak and change organically, as I've said before, this is organic, living, breathing documents. We'll be putting things in, taking things out. So yes, to Councillor Tan's point, we will make those upgrades as we go. But this is a document that I'm going to be using to manage the corporation and to make sure that the resources that are required in each one of these key areas are being assigned and reassigned properly based on changing variables through council cycle. So if what we will do is go back, we've got a series of notes that will update some of these things. And I just want to make sure that council is aware, as well as the public listening at home. This is not all the work of the corporation. So these are just the key results. We still run a 365-day a year, 24/7 operation, providing services to residents in a variety of different factors. These are extra projects that are moving your strategic plan forward, in addition to us providing services to nearly 100,000 residents on a day-to-day basis. So there's a whole other bucket of work that we will be pulling in and out of as we go through business planning that might align, might not align, or extra things that come up that are topical that will be added to the document that I can do on behalf of the corporation, and then provide that update to council. So what you're really being asked today is, are you comfortable with the framework? Are you comfortable with the process putting in place? And as we go through it, we'll be adding more detail, we'll be adding more data, and we'll be changing things as we go. So it's very much an ability for us. And it gives you a line of sight on holding me accountable for the work that I'm doing leading the organization.
Okay. Did that answer? Okay, good. Any final? Seeing none, I will call the question to the recommendation on the screen. All those in favor? And it is unanimous. Thank you very much. Good debate. Good question. Great presentation. It's exciting to see where and how we're going to get to where we need to go. Madam Clerk, do we have anything else on the agenda?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do not. The last item on the agenda is adjournment.
Oh, look at that. Just a reminder that we will be in closed at 3 p.m. With MP Mark Dalton. And seeing as how we have no further business, it is now 12:22. We will adjourn until then. Thank you.